Hi there, and welcome to Israel Explained. Today we'll be looking at some renewed hope for a deal on both fronts. Israel's expanded its operation in Lebanon, bringing in a fourth division. And meanwhile, in Gaza, starting with Jabalia, they seem to have begun to enact the aggressive um, island plan to take over city by city through siege and then take over a distribution in each one of those cities. The combination of the two aggressive moves has definitely thrown the Iranian coalition on the back foot, and there seems to be renewed interest in a ceasefire. Resistance in both fronts to Israel is cracking. In the first few days of the Israeli invasion of Lebanon, there was fierce fighting from Hezbollah. That seems to have faded. In most villages that Israel is going into right now, it's not running into any resistance, or it's running into sparse resistance. In Gaza, the rebuilding of Hamas has been relatively swift, but not swift enough to really be able to slow down Israeli operations there. Although in Gaza there has been a delay, citizens there are refusing to evacuate. The IDF gave the citizens of Jabalia and the areas around orders to evacuate. Hamas told them not to evacuate, and so far most people are not. Some of that is Hamas's orders, but probably more after leaving their homes, going down to the south, living in refugee camps in Rafah and the Mawasi. I'm not sure that the residents of the north want to go back again. I think some of them would rather take their chances in the north than go through all that again, and that's a real problem for the plan. Nonetheless, the aggressive Israeli moves and their successes, especially with assassinations, have brought changes in the approaches to a ceasefire from both Hamas and Hezbollah. Let's start with Hamas. So Sinwar was out of touch with the negotiators for quite a while. Although a few couple weeks ago it became pretty clear he was alive, he was giving messages with pen and paper, whatever. Now he's in much more close contact with the mediators, especially with Qatar. And a couple of things have brought him back to this process. One is his fear of assassination. With so many assassinations occurring, Hezbollah, Iran, Hamas, Sinwar is rightfully concerned for his safety. People have said he's taken some precautions, like surrounding himself with hostages, etc., but he's still nervous. So he's been asking for some sort of amnesty, or talking about some sort of amnesty for him if negotiations renew. Another thing is, Qatar seems to have decided that their reputation has taken a serious blow, that too many people, the Americans and Israelis, see them as sort of stooges for Hamas, and they've taken a more confrontational stance with Sinwar. They've told Sinwar that unless he starts talking more seriously, they're not going to fund rebuilding Gaza. They've also told him that they plan to freeze some Hamas accounts. So that's happening. But also, Sinwar is seeing what's happening with Hezbollah. He's seeing that Israel's managing to wall up Hezbollah a lot more than he thought, and that his dream of uniting the fronts isn't going as well as he hoped. So all of that is creating more room for renewed talks with Hamas. Of course, Israel would rather get more achievements with the island plan in northern Gaza before doing so, and of course, to get more achievements in Lebanon as well. Just as importantly as Qatar pressuring Hamas, Iran is said to be pressuring Hezbollah. Their bet on Hezbollah being able to take a serious toll on Israel has not paid off. Iran is concerned that if Hezbollah continues to take a pounding, Hezbollah will lose some of its stature in Lebanon, which would weaken Iran in the region, and that their inability to protect Hezbollah is also humiliating Iran. So there's some pressure on Hezbollah now from Iran to reach a deal with Israel independent of Hamas. And that certainly is a first. And Hezbollah is not only facing pressure from Iran, they're facing pressure from the opposition in Lebanon, some of whom are taking great joy in seeing them chastened, but also by their own community. There's a lot of people in the Shiite community who are saying that they've done too much damage, too many people have died, too many people have lost their homes, and are disturbed by the fact that Hezbollah has not been able to put up the kind of fight that they expected it to put up. So Hezbollah is really losing a lot of allies and a lot of support. So that's why we saw an interview with Naim Qassem. Naim Qassem was the is technically considered the deputy to the head of Hezbollah. He was the deputy to Nasrallah. He was never a leader. He was never someone who made decisions, but he's a familiar face. He's someone who's well known in Lebanon, and therefore Hezbollah is putting him front and center. And he gave an interview which was very interesting. He said that now he supports the moves by the Lebanese government to move towards a ceasefire. He hinted that he's willing to do so without Gaza being involved. And he said, don't be impatient while we negotiate. That's undoubtedly a sign of weakness for the organization as they've been pummeled repeatedly by the IDF and as their entire top brass, aside from him basically, has been liquidated. That's not to say that this war isn't taking a toll on Israel as well. Of course, the northern villages are evacuated already, and Hezbollah has managed to expand the line of fire into Haifa. Haifa being the third biggest urban center in Israel, that's significant. And school there will be stopped tomorrow, but that's nothing compared, of course, to the price that Israel has made Hezbollah pay so far. So we're talking about a war that's going very well for Israel. So far, it had limited goals of taking over the villages near the border and assassinating the top brass of Hezbollah. It's doing very well on both counts, and it's the fact that it's limited but relentless. That combination is bringing in great results. Israel's in no rush to start ceasefire talks again, despite the fact that, of course, the lives of the hostages are on the line. But unlike my usual criticism of Netanyahu, this time there's some sense to it. Right now, Israel seems to have a strategy for the first time in a very long time, and that involves continuing to put pressure on Hezbollah, making the north safe for the residents, and thereby um, undoing the connection between the northern front and the southern front by inflicting such a price on Hezbollah that they are willing to cut a separate deal. And then, meanwhile, also escalating in Gaza in order to put pressure on Hamas. And that seems to be working, a lot of it diplomatically, because Iran and Qatar are cooperating with this strategy and putting pressure on their proxies to reach a deal. The problem I foresee for this strategy, I'm not saying it's not going to work, it's doing quite well, is that Israel doesn't necessarily have the forces to continue the operation in Lebanon and enact the islands plan. So right now there's four divisions in Lebanon. I'm not sure that if Israel decides to expand the island plan in Gaza elsewhere, they'll necessarily have enough forces. It will certainly strain Israeli forces to the max, leading to very large reserve deployments. But having said that, Israel's in the best position in the war that it's been in months. If it needs to stretch its sources to the limit to continue this, it's worth it. And the Israelis are saying that they're in a point of strength. A source told Channel 12, a senior Israeli security source, said Israel is at a point of strength and a ceasefire will be on our conditions. I think that's correct, that Israel right now is at a point of strength, but you have to make sure not to overdo it. Once Israel reaches the point where it has the leverage to reach a good deal in Lebanon and in Gaza, it needs to take it. Because as we know, this war swings back and forth. You're on top today, you're not on top tomorrow. A bunch of soldiers die, a bunch of civilians die, in something that has a lot of publicity, everything changes. Israel needs to leverage the advantage it has now to end this war on a high note, not to continue this war forever. That's why I'm concerned about people who are talking about regime change in Iran and so on and so forth. Those are things that Israel can't do. It doesn't have the power to do that. It needs to keep focused on reaching a ceasefire on good terms, bringing back the hostages, bringing back the people of the North safely to their homes. And that's within reach. And I have to give credit to the government and to the IDF for revamping their strategy, reshaping their strategy, and having a path forward to achieve it. Continue on that path. Um, I had more comments than questions on my previous video. A lot of the pro-Palestinian people discovered my channel last time, so I had a lot of comments of that sort. But I did have one question from Mitch Harris. Ultimately hopes for major long-term changes in outlook run through the Islamic Republic of Iran. Are there any weaknesses in the Iranian military that may lead to a coup? So the I think that the talk about the weakness of the Iranian regime is overblown. The Iranian government is quite good at creating a circle of people who are loyalists, who get good benefits from the government, who have no interest in coup. They've never really had any trouble with the military obeying their orders, shooting on protesters, those sorts of things. Only when we start seeing that happen will we see that the regime is in real crisis. A regime doesn't have to be popular in order to stay in power. It just has to be able to flex its muscle. And Iran is able to flex its muscle. And that's why I don't really see that there are weaknesses in the Iranian military that will lead to a coup. I hope I'm wrong, and I hope that we soon start to see them. Okay, so if you like what I do here, consider supporting me on Patreon at Kyle Media. Consider listening to my history podcast, History of the Land of Israel podcast, where I'm working on an episode on the fall of the line of the Omerides. And I will see you here next time something interesting happens.